Hey, it's Mike with JTS, and I'm going to talk about how to get your JTS AK12 shotgun back together. Once you've taken it apart, you got it all cleaned, you want to get it back together. Couple of quick things. Again, just because the weapon is totally broken down at this point, we don't forget about safety. We always remember where that weapon is pointed. We keep our finger off the trigger. We follow all the same safety rules. And then as we're putting it together, make sure you take your time. You're doing it correctly. Don't let yourself get frustrated. Too often when people start putting guns together, they just try to go too fast. Go ahead and take your time. So one of the first things we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and make sure we get our piston back in place. And again, if you followed how the gun came apart, we pretty much do everything in reverse order. So goes in there, and we'll make sure that that locks into place. And then we have our little selector switch here, and we want to make sure that that's straight up and down, and then we'll be able to just go ahead and feed that back in and then lock it back in place, and that front section is done. This is the part I think that gives people the most fits when trying to put an AK back together, and obviously an AK12 shotgun, is getting that bolt back in place, because we need to make sure that these ridges right here, and you get those close-up pictures of what I'm talking about on these ridges right here, that they get underneath this rail section. And again, we'll look at the close-up of that. So again, it has to get underneath that rail section for it to be able to fit all the way forward. And a lot of times when people are doing this, they get really frustrated. The other thing about the bolt is I want the bolt extended out. Too often people have it all the way back like this, and that bolt is not sitting flat. It's a little hard to see in video, but when you do it in live, you'll see it. So when putting the bolt back in, I like to have the bolt fully extended out, right? And so we're flat right here. And remember, I need to get these rails underneath the rails on the receiver here. So again, take your time. The first few times you do this in particular, it's going to take a little bit of fuss to get it to work just right. But once you've done it a few times, you're able to slide that in, and it's really not a problem. But you do have to make sure you get those rails underneath the rails in the frame. Otherwise, it's just not going to go back together. Nice thing about it is you really can't put a gun together wrong. So it's just, you can have it just not go back together, or it'll go back together correctly. We're going to go ahead, take the spring, slide it in there. And again, this is under some spring tension, so be careful as you're working with it. Make sure, it's always a good idea to wear some safety glasses. And also make sure that you're keeping some control on it, because again, these parts are under tension. Once you fit that in, you just slide it back into place. Again, we'll get a nice close-up picture of how that should look. And then you can just go ahead and close your dust cover. Your gun is back together, and you're ready to head back out to the range.